I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry. The president must be held accountable. No one is above the law.
That was the moment when the most powerful Democrat in Washington flipped the switch on impeachment, sparking a process that led to 2 weeks of these often stunning public hearings, each revelation more damaging to Trump, it seemed, than the last. And now next week, a report from Chairman Schiff, and then the Judiciary Committee begins its process, which can lead to the actual articles of impeachment against Trump. All of it a reminder of how powerful the Speaker is. Nancy Pelosi can hold things back or let them loose. Her initial resistance to a full-blown impeachment was not, though, out of character. Do you remember when she made history in 2006? She was the first woman speaker in American history. She faced a very controversial Republican president. He was under fire for policy, like the Iraq War, but also very serious allegations of abuse of power, like warrantless spying and torture. But she left no doubt that she was not going to turn her speakership into an impeachment march against President Bush.
In some quarters, folks will think that you are a San Francisco liberal who has nothing said on your mind other than unleashing your lieutenants to impeach the president.
I have said, and I say again, that impeachment is off the table.
Off the table. Pelosi laying down that marker explicitly because so many on the left were demanding it, reporters repeating those questions, as you heard. 38 members of Congress introduced a specific resolution pushing for at least an impeachment inquiry against Bush. And back in the day, Stephen Colbert, who was doing his satirical Colbert character, laid out the reasons why he was urging the Democrats his character opposed to impeach Bush.
I mean, the Republicans impeached Bill Clinton. I mean, don't you want to get back at them for that? I mean, wouldn't that feel good? After all, the president's been baiting you guys for 6 years. WMDs, Iraq, Katrina, Valerie Plame, signing statements, torture, wiretaps, secret prisons, U.S. attorneys.
Now, Speaker Pelosi was making what she thought was a bigger picture decision to avoid impeachment. And years later, she actually laid out why.
The argument against President Bush was about a president and an administration that sent us into a war based on a false representation of the threat of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I do think people could have made a case about President Bush, but I did not want to go down that path because of what it would mean for the American people.
Didn't want to go down that path because of what it would mean. This is really interesting as everyone gets ready to try to understand what the House does next week, because it cuts against these depictions. You've probably heard that Pelosi is always occupying the far left or most aggressive wing of the party. In the Trump presidency, Pelosi and her point person on all this, Adam Schiff, were very cautious when the Mueller report first dropped, even though it had substantial evidence of obstruction in the report.
If a majority of your caucus, wants to go forward with an impeachment inquiry, would you go for it?
It's not even close in our caucus about
But eventually,
well, you know, why are we speculating on hypotheticals?
Has it brought you closer to an impeachment inquiry?
I don't know. The Constitution provides impeachment as a remedy. It doesn't compel Congress to act and impeach whenever there are grounds for impeachment.
What we want to do is have a methodical approach. Not any one issue is going to trigger, oh, now we'll go do this.
Pelosi and Schiff were holding back. Judiciary Committee Chairman Nadler, though, was often seen as a lawmaker driving impeachment about obstruction, and a Washington Post poll released right after that report came out showed about 37% backed impeachment. After Pelosi announced the start of this probe in September, it's already jumped 21 points to 58%. Now, there are obviously at least two factors driving that: the facts of the particular Ukraine scandal, and then what happens when the Democrats go fully on offense with Pelosi behind them. Now, in a cynical world that treats so many choices as a matter of just optics, note that this shift involves a factual and logical point. Some Democrats, including Speaker Pelosi, were arguing that you should skip impeachment and just stop Donald Trump in the next election. I bet you've heard people say that, right? But the Ukraine scandal did something very different to Speaker Pelosi. It undercut that very logic with the evidence that Trump is abusing power to cheat in the next election, corrupting that very check and balance. And that is why so many top Democrats said Trump's actions basically left them no choice.
We had no choice but to go forward.
We're not fooling around here.
We see the actions of this president being an assault on the Constitution.
Where is Speaker Pelosi headed next? I'm about to get into it with a very special guest from We're Back in 30. And we're back with Mark Thompson. Your thoughts on the Speaker's shift here on impeachment?
Well, thank you for having me, Ari. I think you put it well. For the argument to have been to wait and let the election handle it, when, in fact, what he was doing was going to impact the election, I think left no choice. I think she's been very methodical about it, and that's how she operates. Her daughter, Christine Pelosi, has written a new book, The Nancy Pelosi Way, and she describes her mother as once sitting at a loom, not whipping members of Congress, but weaving the tapestry within Congress, all the diversity of the Democratic caucus. The Democratic caucus has the biggest tent after all, and weaving all of those intricate threads together in a tapestry. And that's what she did when she found out about Ukraine. She called Trump and said, tell your people to obey the law. The other thing, too, that I think obviously changed her and may continue to change us all, Maxine Waters even said it early on, Nancy Pelosi ultimately agreed, Trump is self-impeaching. Right. So that while the Mueller report was spun by Barr in such a way that it lacked the teeth to go forward on that as an impeachment referral, what does he do the very next day? What does Trump do the very next day but call the Ukraine self-impeaching? So, I mean, I think the real problem she has and the Democrats have is what else is he going to do, or what else has he done that we don't even know about? It's almost like leaving a tab open because he might do something else. If you move on this, then we might look up in January and February he's done something else. So this is a problem I think is going to persist.
I'll tell you, never leave a tab open. You never leave the tab open. You don't know what's going to be put on there. You know, you talk about the big tent. You know who you sound like, Mark?
You know, who does that sound
You sound like Mark Thompson. Because we dug up where you've been and looking at this, because I've had the benefit of your analysis over these many months. We point out to our viewers, you interview a lot of these folks, including the Speaker in the House. Here's what you said in September.
Okay. The Speaker doing what she needs to do. Frankly, the Democrats did win the midterms on policy issues. The Democratic Party's tent and reach and arms are long enough and big enough that you can have members articulate impeachment while other members articulate policy issues.
And so with the 30 seconds we have left, you look at that shift you diagnose. How is she going to run these hearings next week?
Well, I think we're going to hear from certain experts about why impeachment is appropriate and constitutional and legal. And I think really just take it one step at a time. And as I said, he's self-impeaching. He makes it impossible for her or the Democrats to sit on their hands. So I think Donald Trump will be impeached.
Yeah, well, look, Mark, I've appreciated your insights along the way. I hope, if there is an open tab, I hope you have some good stuffing and turkey on that tab, sir. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you, sir. Thank you for having me.